February 13, 2026. Put a pin in that date. Because depending on who you ask, today is either just another rainy Friday in Washington, D.C., or it's the day we officially realize the world has changed forever.
It's been exactly 382 days since the executive order dropped, the order that officially launched the Golden Dome.
And what a year it has been. We have a unique situation on the desk today. Usually on this show, we look at one book, one article, maybe a research paper. We dive deep into one person's brain. But today, we are looking at two documents that, frankly, should not exist in the same universe.
They really shouldn't. They represent two completely different realities, two different languages describing the same object.
On my left, I have the transcript from yesterday's event at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. This is the establishment, the politicos, the defense contractors in nice suits, drinking, bad conference coffee. They called their event Golden Dome. 1 year in.
Right. This is the polite society view. It's technical, it's careful, it's very concerned with budgets and authorities and not upsetting the donors.
And on my right, I have the raw code, the leak, the Realpolitik Bulldozer manifesto. Specifically, the Donroe Dictionary and the Iron Trinity framework. This is the underground theory that predicted everything the establishment is now just sort of scratching their heads about.
So our mission today is a forensic audit. We aren't here to just recap the news. We are going to overlay these two sources. We want to see if the polite experts at CSIS realize they're describing the exact same machine that the manifesto predicted, or if they are just staring at the hubcaps while the car runs them over.
So let's crack this open. The fundamental question. What is the Golden Dome? If you're just tuning into the nightly news, you probably think it's a giant shield, a physical dome over the map, like in a sci-fi movie.
That's the popular view. But let's look at what Tom Carrico, he's the director of the Missile Defense Project at CSIS, actually said yesterday. He was very specific about what the dome is not.
I have the quote here. He says, "It is not a thing, not a program, not a single system." He calls it an initiative to pull together what we have.
Pull together what we have. It sounds modest, doesn't it? Like he's organizing a neighborhood potluck. You bring the potato salad, I'll bring the Patriot missiles.
It sounds like bureaucratic shuffling.
Yeah.
Like they're just rebranding old tech and calling it something new and shiny to get more funding.
But what he's actually describing is integration. And that is a very, very powerful word in defense. He's talking about taking a Patriot battery sitting in a field in Poland, a Tajid system in Korea, an Aegis destroyer floating in the Red Sea, and F-35 sensors in the air and wiring them into a single nervous system.
So instead of a goalie trying to block a shot alone, you have the entire team moving in sync, almost telepathically.
Exactly. It's a system of systems. That's the CSIS buzzword. They love it. It implies cooperation, efficiency, everything working together. But now, let's look at the manifesto. Because the bulldozer framework doesn't care about system of systems. It uses a much more specific, much more modern term.
It calls it the hemispheric firewall.
A firewall. Now stop and think about that word. You use a computer every day. What does a firewall do on your laptop?
It filters traffic. It decides what gets in and what gets blocked based on a set of rules. It doesn't negotiate with the virus. It just blocks it.
Precisely. CSIS sees a shield, something that blocks a physical object. The manifesto sees a firewall, something that filters everything. It defines the Golden Dome as the hardware layer of the logistical operating system.
The logistical OS. We need to spend some time on this because this seems to be the core concept of the Donroe Dictionary. And honestly, it sounds a bit like cyberpunk gibberish until you really dig into it.
It does sound like fiction, but it's the most accurate description of the modern world I think I've ever seen. The manifesto argues that in 2026, sovereignty isn't about having a flag or a border or a seat at the UN. It's about which operating system you are running. Are you running the American OS or are you running the Chinese OS?
And the Golden Dome is the hardware that enforces that choice. It's the bouncer at the door.
It's the tech stack. It's not just missiles. It's SpaceX orbital dominance providing the data. It's the DOGE administrative audits ensuring the money is clean. And this is the kicker. It's trade tariffs.
Wait, connect that for me. I get how a missile interceptor is part of a defense system. I mean, that's obvious. But how is a 25% tariff on steel part of a missile defense system?
Because in a firewall, you don't just block viruses, which would be the missiles, you block corrupted data. And in the bulldozer worldview, corrupted data is cheap, subsidize goods from a rival power that are designed to undermine your industrial base. The manifesto says the dome filters out the UN virus while ensuring 99.9% uptime for members.
That is a wild reframing. So if you were inside the dome, if you've installed the OS, say you're a country like Mexico or Canada, you get the benefits.
You get the whitelisted treatment, high-speed data via Starlink, protected energy routes, no tariffs. Your economy hums along at 99.9% uptime. It's a premium service.
But if you're outside, or if you try to, play both sides,
You get throttled. You get blocked. Your data slows down. Your goods get hit with tariffs. Your financial transactions get flagged. CSIS looks at this huge apparatus and sees integrated defense. The manifesto looks at it and sees geopolitical onboarding. They are describing the same mechanism, but the manifesto admits what it's actually for. It's not just for safety. It's for compliance.
it's a subscription service. Sovereignty is a service.
Exactly. You pay your dues, you follow the rules, you shut out the Chinese infrastructure, you align your foreign policy, and you get the protection. You stop paying, the firewall blocks you.
That's terrifyingly simple. And it leads us directly to the threat assessment. Why build this massive firewall now? What changed in the world to make this necessary?
According to CSIS, the threat environment has just completely exploded. We heard from Lieutenant General Dan Karbler, retired. He used to run Army space and missile defense. He was very blunt. He said the threat has multiplied and proliferated.
It's not just ICBMs anymore, right?
Yeah.
We aren't just worried about a few big nukes from the Cold War era.
No, not at all. It's UAVs, cruise missiles, hypersonic glide vehicles. And he said something really important. Geography is no longer a sanctuary. He also mentioned bombardment from space, which is a phrase that should probably keep you up at night.
We used to think the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans were our best defense, the giant moats.
Karbler says those moats are gone, dried up. He noted that missile attacks are normal now. Think about that for a second. 10 years ago, if a country fired a ballistic missile at another country, it was front-page news for a week. The UN would convene.
Now, it's a Tuesday.
Look at Ukraine, look at the Middle East. It's background noise. The threshold for usage has dropped to the floor.
So the CSIS view is there are more bad guys with more toys, so we need a better umbrella. It's a reactive posture.
Essentially, they view it as a symptom. There's a proliferation of symptoms, so we need a stronger treatment. It's a diagnosis based on what they can see today.
Now flip the page to the manifesto. How does the bulldozer diagnose this? Because I have a feeling they don't think it's just about more toys.
The manifesto agrees on the symptoms, but identifies a completely different root cause. It says we are seeing the collapse of the Westphalian model of sovereignty.
Westphalian. Okay, hold on. We need to unpack that term because it sounds like something out of a history lecture. Explain it like I'm 5. What is the Westphalian model?
Okay, simple version. 1648. The Peace of Westphalia. After decades of bloody religious war in Europe, everyone sat down and agreed on a basic rule. I am the king of France, you are the king of Spain. I define what happens inside my borders, you define what happens inside yours, and we don't mess with each other's internal settings.
Borders are sacred lines. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Exactly. That has been the operating system of the world for almost 400 years. The manifesto argues that model is dead. Dead and buried.
Why? What killed it?
Technology. In a world of digital warfare, influence campaigns, financial warfare, and hypersonics, borders are permeable. They're just lines on a map. You can attack a country's economy, crash its stock market, shut down its grid, without ever sending a soldier across the border.
So the distinction between war and peace is gone. It's just a spectrum of conflict.
It's all just traffic. And if the Westphalian model is dead, then diplomacy is dead too. The manifesto argues that conflict is now just engineering-based clearance.
Engineering-based clearance. That sounds robotic, inhuman.
It is. If a rival state is acting up, the logistical OS doesn't send a diplomat to negotiate a treaty. It views that rival as a corrupted sector on the hard drive. You don't negotiate with a corrupted sector, you format it.
That explains the ruthlessness we see in the Donroe Dictionary, the force restart.
Exactly. If a nation refuses to sync with the Golden Dome, the system doesn't declare war, it just clears the cache. It removes the regime, installs a compatible interface, and reboots the country. It's a tech support solution to a geopolitical problem.
That is a chilling way to look at international relations.
Yeah.
But it brings us to the backbone of this whole thing. Space. You can't run a global operating system without a network.
Space is the high ground. It's the server room for planet Earth.
CSIS was very optimistic about space. Tom Carrico talked about launch costs dropping. He said launch costs have dropped 10 to 100 times.
That's the Starship effect. Let's put that in real numbers for you listening. 10 years ago, if you wanted to put a pound of payload into orbit, it cost you about $10,000. It was like shipping gold bricks.
You had to be very, very selective about what you sent up. Every ounce mattered.
Right, today. With the heavy lift vehicles, the massive reusable rockets, we're looking at numbers closer to hundreds of dollars per pound. Maybe even less in the near future.
That completely changes the physics of what you can build in space. It's a paradigm shift.
It changes the entire architecture. CSIS calls this proliferated EO, low Earth orbit. Instead of building one giant Battlestar Galactica satellite that costs $1 billion, and if it gets hit, you're blind, you launch 5,000 tiny, cheap satellites.
It's a swarm, a constellation.
It's a mesh network. If the enemy shoots down 10 or 100, who cares? The network reroutes. It's self-healing. CSIS views this as the ultimate budget win. We are finally winning the cost curve. It's a celebration of American technological and commercial prowess.
But, and there is always a but, when we open the manifesto, I'm looking at Chapter 7 here, it has a section on SPF-1.
Single point of failure number 1.
And what is that?
It's the orbital kernel. The manifesto identifies the commercial satellite network, specifically the militarized version, Starshield, as the kernel of the logistical OS. It says, and this is a direct quote, "Whoever controls orbit controls the flows."
So while CSIS is celebrating that launch costs are down, the manifesto is warning that we are building the entire security architecture of the Western Hemisphere on a single private constellation.
Correct. CSIS sees a viable backbone. The manifesto sees a monopoly. Think about it. If the Golden Dome relies on Starshield for data, for sensor tracking, for communications, for the firewall effect, then the entity that controls Starshield effectively has root access to the hemisphere's security.
That's a massive vulnerability. Or a massive leverage point, depending on who you are.
Imagine a scenario where the owner of the network disagrees with the President of the United States about a conflict. Maybe the President wants to defend a certain area, but the owner thinks it's bad for business. Or morally wrong.
We saw hints of this in Ukraine years ago, didn't we? When Starlink coverage was restricted in certain zones near Crimea.
Exactly. Geopolitics by Wi-Fi switch. The manifesto calls it an existential vulnerability if you are a state trying to resist. But it also notes it as a risk for the system itself. If that network goes down, or if the owner decides to change the terms of service, the dome goes dark.
CSIS didn't really touch on the private ownership risk, did they? Of a transcript, it's all about capability and cost.
Not really. They focused on the capability. Look what we can do, the manifesto asks. Who actually holds the keys? They're focused on different layers of the problem.
Let's move to the ground. Because even with space lasers and satellites, you still have to deal with, well, politicians.
This was one of the most interesting moments in the CSIS transcript for me. Dan Karbler brought up an acronym. CVRTP.
I love military acronyms. They always sound so sterile and scientific. Break it down for us.
Usually when the military decides what to defend, they use a formula called CVRT. Criticality, vulnerability, recuperability, and threat. It's a math equation. How important is this asset? How hard is it to fix if it's broken? How likely is it to get hit?
It's rational, logical. Save the power plant, maybe let the shopping mall go. Cold, hard math.
But Karbler added a P for political.
B factor.
He admitted, quite candidly, that politics will alter the scientific ranking. A governor, a mayor, a senator is going to demand protection for their specific slab of concrete, as he put it, even if the strategic math says that slab of concrete isn't a priority at all.
So you have a scientifically designed shield optimized by AI, and then a politician comes in and says, hey, put a Patriot battery in my district or I won't vote for the budget.
Exactly. Karbler calls it the P factor and kind of shrugs it off as the cost of doing business in a democracy. The manifesto calls it SPF4.
Single point of failure number 4.
Protocol corruption. The manifesto explicitly states that politics is an internal threat to the logistical OS. The system is designed for an efficiency mandate. It says, and I'm quoting again, no government slower than an AI.
No government slower than an AI. But democracy is slower than an AI. That's kind of the point of democracy. It's messy. It involves debate, compromise, consensus.
And that's the conflict. The manifesto argues that the efficiency mandate is threatened by human political interference. It views the politician lobbying for his district not as a representative of the people, but as malware slowing down the system, as a bug in the code.
So CSIS admits the P factor exists and shrugs like that's life in a democracy.
Yep.
The manifesto identifies it as a bug that needs to be, what, fixed?
Patched. or bypassed. Remember the Arctic pivot mentioned in the manifesto? The Greenland acquisition strategy?
The Greenland move. Everyone thought that was about minerals and rare earth elements.
It was. But the manifesto argues for securing Greenland primarily to bypass the high-latency EU-NATO bureaucracy. If you can't get the politicians in Brussels or Washington to agree on where to put the radars, you route around them. You build your nodes in places where there are fewer voters to complain.
Greenland has a very small population. Very few voters to create latency.
Exactly. The manifesto prefers administrative zones over democracies because in an administrative zone, the OS just runs. No debates, no elections to worry about, no P factor.
That brings us to the money, the math.
Yeah.
Because none of this is cheap. And this is where I think the manifesto makes its strongest point about the paradox.
The optimization paradox.
Start with the CSIS view. Karaturko addressed the history of missile defense.
He did. He was very honest about it. He said in the early 2000s, the technology was there, it was feasible, but the math and economics didn't work.
It costs way more to shoot down the missile than it did for the other guy to launch it. The cost-exchange ratio.
Right. If I fire a $100,000 CD missile at you, and you have to use a $3 million Patriot interceptor to stop it, I win. I don't even need to hit you. I can just keep firing cheap missiles until you go bankrupt.
And in the CSIS briefing, they imply that cheap launch costs and new tech might fix the math. But they don't explicitly say, we solved the equation. They hand-wave it a bit. They talk about directed energy lasers as the future solution, but it's still years away from being deployed at scale.
They're hopeful, but the manifesto is brutal about this. It argues that maximum efficiency creates vulnerability to cheap disruptions. It calls it the cheap proxy paradox.
Walk me through a scenario here. How does this paradox play out in real life?
Okay, look at the Red Sea or the Black Sea from a few years ago. You have a U.S. Navy destroyer. A state-of-the-art Aegis combat system. Costs $2 billion.
A floating fortress, the pinnacle of naval engineering.
And it's being attacked by a swarm of drones, not high-tech military drones. I'm talking about commercial quadcopters with grenades strapped to them, or cheap fixed-wing drones made of plywood and lawnmower engines, the kind the Houthis use. Cost, maybe $2,000 each.
So the destroyer has to defend itself.
It fires a standard missile. Cost, $2 million, maybe more.
$2 million to stop a $2,000 drone. The math is catastrophic.
It's unsustainable. It's a losing game. The manifesto asks the key question. Who wins this attrition war? If the Golden Dome is this high-tech, super expensive, gold-plated system, can it be bankrupt by a guy with a 3D printer and a bad attitude?
And does the manifesto have an answer? Because if the math is broken, the shield eventually fails. It's inevitable.
It suggests the answer isn't better interceptors, it's source elimination. Meaning, you don't shoot down the arrow, you kill the archer. This goes back to the bulldozer concept itself. If the math of defense doesn't work, you are forced to go on offense. You can't afford to sit there and play goalkeeper forever. You have to go wipe out the launch site, or the factory that builds the drones, or the regime that funds the factory.
So the optimization paradox leads inevitably to the Realpolitik Bulldozer. The only way to make the budget work is to destroy the enemy before they can even launch. A preemptive strategy.
It's a chilling logic, but it's internally consistent. Defensive systems eventually fail because of the math. Offensive systems fix the math by removing the other side of the equation.
We've covered the hardware, the politics, the money, but there is a huge gap here, a blind spot. I read through the CSIS transcript twice. I looked for mentions of people, morale, ideology, resentment.
What did you find?
Almost nothing. They talk about getting the authorities right. They talk about decision loops. They mention the political factor, but only as an annoyance. But they don't talk about the people inside the system or the people being formatted by the system.
This is the technocratic blind spot. It's a classic engineering mindset. CSIS is debating how to build the machine. They assume that if the machine works, if the radars spin and the missiles fly, the problem is solved.
But the manifesto, Chapter 7 touches on this, has a section called Unsigned Packets.
This is the most philosophical and perhaps the most disturbing part of the whole text. It says the system has no variable for resentment.
No variable for resentment. That line really stuck with me.
Think about how a computer works. It processes data. It optimizes flows. The logistical OS is designed for things. Containers, data packets, barrels of oil. It treats humans who don't fit the system. Refugees, dissidents, people left behind by the efficiency mandate as unsigned packets.
And what does a firewall do with an unsigned packet? A piece of data it doesn't recognize.
It blocks it, it quarantines it, it deletes it, it views it as malware, a threat to the integrity of the network.
But humans aren't code. You can't just debug a population that hates you.
Exactly. The manifesto warns that the system doesn't understand why someone would want to break the golden cage.
The golden cage. That's the perfect image for it.
Imagine you live inside the dome, you have safety, you have 99.9% uptime, you have cheap energy, but you have no say. The algorithm decides your trade policy. The algorithm decides your foreign policy. You are safe, but you are not free.
The core paradox.
Yes. The manifesto states, the human soul is preserved, but the regime is formatted. It warns that you can build the perfect golden dome, you can have Starlink internet every village, but if the people hate you, if they feel like they are just cogs in a machine they didn't choose,
They will find a way to break it?
they will throw a wrench in the gears.
Yeah.
Or a rock, or a cheap drone. The manifesto calls this SPF3, consciousness. The one thing the AI cannot model is the irrational desire of a human being to say no, even if saying no is economically stupid or physically dangerous.
So we've audited the two sources. Let's do a quick, rapid-fire summary. I'll give you the category. You tell me who has the better read on reality. CSIS or the bulldozer?
Let's do it. Fire away.
Category 1, the architecture. CSIS says system of systems. Bulldozer says hemispheric firewall. Status.
Validated for the bulldozer, system of systems describes how it works mechanically, but firewall describes what it does strategically. It filters the world. It's a more accurate metaphor.
Okay, category 2, the threat. CSIS, proliferated, geography no longer protects. Bulldozer, end of Westphalian sovereignty, conflict threshold dropped. Status.
Again, validated for the bulldozer. Proliferation is just counting missiles. The end of sovereignty explains why the missiles are flying. The rules of the game have broken down. CSIS is describing the symptom. The manifesto diagnoses the cause.
Category 3, space. CSIS sees a viable backbone due to cost drops. Bulldozer sees an orbital kernel, but warns it's SPF1, a single point of failure.
On this one, CSIS omits the risk. They are right that the cost reduction is a miracle. It makes the dome possible. But the bulldozer is right that relying on one vendor, one orbital kernel is an insane strategic risk. CSIS is ignoring the risk because they love the savings.
Next, politics. CSIS admits the problem with CVRTP, the P factor. The bulldozer maps it as SPF4, protocol corruption.
Fully validated. CSIS publicly admits the problem exists. Bulldozer just uses meaner, more accurate words to describe it. They both agree that democracy slows down the machine.
How about the math? CSIS acknowledges the historical problem but hopes technology will fix it. Bulldozer calls it the optimization paradox.
That's still an open question. The bulldozer wins this one for flagging it so clearly. The math hasn't been fixed. The cheap proxy paradox is still the Achilles heel of the entire Golden Dome. You can't shoot down $2,000 drones with $2 million missiles forever.
And finally, the human factor.
This is a major blind spot for CSIS. It's not mentioned. The manifesto, on the other hand, identifies it as the ultimate vulnerability, SPF3. The system cannot calculate the human soul.
So where does this leave us?
Yeah.
We are 1 year into the Golden Dome. The machine is being built. The satellites are going up.
The machine is being built, and the experts at CSIS are marveling at the gears. Look how well the radar talks to the interceptor. But the manifesto suggests we are building something much bigger and much scarier than a missile defense system.
We are building a new operating system for the world.
One where you are either synced or you are junk.
Sink or junk. That's the slogan we keep hearing from the administration. It sounds so clean.
And that's the danger. Because the world isn't binary. It's not ones and zeros. It's messy. It's gray. And history shows that when you try to force the world into a perfectly efficient machine, the machine eventually breaks, or the people inside it do.
So the final thought here, the core argument. CSIS described the mechanics of the machine. The Bulldozer Manifesto mapped its structural cracks.
One saw the architecture, the other saw the fractures. And the ultimate distinction is this. CSIS sees the Golden Dome as a shield to protect the homeland, a defensive tool.
And the manifesto.
The manifesto sees it as a mechanism to remove the cost of fear. If the homeland is perfectly safe, it allows the bulldozer to engage in offensive infrastructure conquest abroad without fear of retaliation. The shield enables the sword.
It's not a shield, it's a foundation for projecting power.
Precisely. The debate isn't about the satellites or the interceptors. The ultimate vulnerability is not technical. It is the unsigned packet, the human who chooses to break the cage rather than live in a system where sovereignty is just a subscription service.
This was the Bulldozer audit. CSIS spoke. The manifesto answered.
The rest is noise.